My mother called my 10-year-old daughter the ugly one at Christmas dinner. 3 days later, I handed her an eviction notice and her face went white as a sheet. It happened over the mashed potatoes. Of course it did. In my family, cruelty was always served as a side dish, something to be passed around the table along with the gravy and the passive aggression. The air in my parents' dining room was always thick with the smell of overcooked roast and unspoken resentments. It was a formal room, used only for holidays, a museum of my mother's aspirations. The mahogany table was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the cold, judgmental light of the crystal chandelier. Every fork and knife was laid out with military precision. You didn't eat in that room, you performed. My daughter Lily sat beside me. She was 10, all elbows and knees, and a heart so big it barely fit inside her skinny frame. She had my late husband's eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, and a smile that was still figuring itself out. She was trying so hard to be perfect for them. She'd practiced her table manners, wore the itchy dress my mother had sent without complaint, and had her hair pulled back in a tight, neat braid that I knew was giving her a headache. She was a child holding her breath. I knew the feeling. I'd been holding mine for 35 years. My sister Clara sat opposite us, radiant and smug. She was the sun around which my parents' universe had always orbited. Her husband Mark sat beside her, a pale imitation of her own entitlement. They were talking about their recent trip to Bali, their voices loud and performative, painting a picture of a life so effortlessly perfect it felt like an accusation. My father hung on every word, chuckling on cue. My mother watched Clara with a look of pure adoration, the same look a zealot gives a relic. The conversation turned, as it always did, to appearances. My mother was lamenting the fact that we hadn't taken a proper family photo yet. She looked around the table, her eyes scanning each of us like a general inspecting her troops. Her gaze flickered over me, dismissive as always, and then it landed on Lily. Lily was trying to spear a stubborn pea with her fork, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was oblivious for a moment to the weight of my mother's scrutiny. "We'll have to take one before you leave," my mother said, her voice laced with that sweet, poisonous tone she reserved for her most cutting remarks. She looked directly at Clara. "You and Mark look so wonderful. We need to capture it." Then her eyes slid back to my daughter. Her smile was a thin, sharp line. "But why did you bring the ugly one?" The words landed in the center of the table, with the sharp, ugly clink of a dropped knife. For a second, there was silence. A stunned, ringing silence where the universe seemed to pause. I saw Lily's head snap up. Her fork clattered against her plate. Then the laughter started. It wasn't a loud, booming laugh. It was worse. It was a series of small, complicit chuckles. Mark snorted. Clara let out a tinkling little laugh, covering her perfect mouth with her perfect hand. My father cleared his throat and gave a weak, watery smile, his eyes darting away from mine. They were all in on the joke. The joke was my daughter. I watched Lily's face. It was like watching a flower wilt in fast motion. The color drained from her cheeks, then rushed back in a hot, mottled blush. Her lower lip trembled. Her big, beautiful brown eyes, my Tom's eyes, filled with a sudden, shocking slick of tears. She didn't make a sound. She just folded in on herself, her shoulders hunching, trying to become as small as possible, trying to disappear. My own body went cold. My heart felt like it had been dropped in a bucket of ice water. Every instinct screamed at me to launch myself across the table, to overturn the gravy boat, to scream until the crystal chandelier shattered. I wanted to burn that whole polished, perfect room to the ground. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I put my hand on Lily's knee under the table, a small, inadequate anchor in a tidal wave of cruelty. She flinched but didn't pull away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. That's what they expected. That's what they wanted. I was the dramatic one, the oversensitive one. My reaction would become the new problem, eclipsing the initial wound. It was a script we'd been performing for decades, so I changed the script. I waited. Inside my head, a switch flipped. It wasn't a loud, violent sound. It was a quiet, definitive click. The sound of a lock engaging. The sound of a door closing for the last time. The peacemaker in me, the part that had spent a lifetime absorbing blows to keep this fragile, toxic thing called family together. She just died. Right there, between the mashed potatoes and the green bean casserole. And in her place, something else was born, something cold and clear and patient. This ends now. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I don't remember what else was said. I remember the sound of my own breathing, steady and even. I remember the weight of Lily's small body leaning against mine. I remember the taste of ashes in my mouth. We excused ourselves early. My mother waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be so sensitive," she called after us. "It was just a joke." In the car, Lily was quiet. The streetlights painted fleeting stripes across her face, illuminating the tear tracks on her cheeks. I didn't know what to say. She didn't mean it was a lie. Don't listen to her was impossible. So I just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding her small, cold hand. When we got home, she finally spoke. Her voice was a tiny whisper in the dark. "Mommy," she said, not looking at me. "Am I ugly?" My heart didn't just break, it atomized. I pulled over to the curb, killed the engine, and turned to her. I cupped her face in my hands, my thumbs wiping away the fresh tears that had started to fall. "No, baby," I said, my voice thick but steady. "You are the most beautiful thing in my world. You are kind, and you are smart, and you have your daddy's eyes. You are perfect." She looked at me, her gaze so full of pain and confusion, it was a physical blow. Then why did she say it? Why did they laugh? And that was the question, wasn't it? Why? Because they could. Because for my entire life, I had let them. I had taught them that I was a safe place to dump their poison. By absorbing it, by making peace, by always being the bigger person, I had inadvertently marked myself, and now my child, as a target. My silence had been mistaken for acceptance. My patience had been mistaken for weakness. I had made a terrible mistake, and I was going to fix it. That night, after I tucked Lily into bed, I didn't sleep. I sat in the quiet of my small living room, and I thought. I thought about a lifetime of small cuts, 1,000 tiny betrayals that had led to this moment. Family politics are their own kind of landmine, and I had been trained since birth to walk carefully, to never, ever put a foot wrong. I remembered being 8 years old. Clara, who was 10, had been playing with my mother's favorite porcelain ballerina music box. She dropped it. It shattered on the hardwood floor. When my mother came in, her face a thundercloud, Clara pointed a trembling finger at me. "She did it!" she whispered. I was stunned into silence. I got no dessert for a week. Clara got a hug for being so brave as to tell the truth. I learned that the truth was a weapon, and in my family, only certain people were allowed to wield it. I remembered being 16. I had saved up for months from my after-school job to buy a ticket to a concert. The day before the show, my mother informed me that Clara and her friends had decided they wanted to go. My ticket was gone from my desk drawer. "Don't be selfish," my mother had said when I confronted her. "Clara never gets to have any fun. You can see another concert anytime." Clara went. I stayed home. I learned that my desires were secondary, my efforts disposable. When my husband Tom was alive, he saw it. He was an outsider, a man with a normal, loving family, and he looked at my family's dynamics with a kind of horrified fascination. "It's like they have you in a cage, but they've convinced you the door is locked," he used to say. "But it's not, honey. It's not locked." He tried to help me build boundaries. He would stand up to them for me, a gentle, solid wall against their casual cruelty. But they just dismissed him and painted me as the weak woman who let her husband speak for her. After Tom died, it got worse. I was a single mother. I was grieving. I was vulnerable. And they moved in like vultures. They never offered help, not real help. They offered advice. They offered criticism. They offered judgment. My grief was an inconvenience. My struggles were a personal failing. Meanwhile, they poured money into Clara's life like water. A down payment on her house, a new car when her old one was making a funny noise, an investment in Mark's ridiculous startup that went nowhere. I never asked for a dime. I worked 2 jobs when I had to. I budgeted. I made it work. My independence was seen not as a strength, but as proof that I didn't need them. Tom was a planner, a meticulous, cautious man who believed in contingencies. Before he passed, he had sat me down. "Listen," he'd said, his voice weak but his eyes clear. "I've been helping your parents with their finances for years. Your grandma Eleanor, she was a smart woman. She didn't trust your mom with money any more than I do. She set something aside for you and Lily. Don't ever let them tell you it's all gone." He had given me a small, unassuming flash drive. "Everything is on here," he'd told me, for a real rainy day. The sky had been pouring for 3 years, but tonight was a hurricane. I found the flash drive in the back of my desk drawer, tucked inside an old jewelry box. My hands were shaking as I plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up with a list of neatly organized folders. taxes, investments, wills, and one folder labeled Eleanor Trust. I clicked it. My breath caught in my throat. It was all there. Scanned copies of legal documents, bank statements, correspondence between my grandmother's lawyer and my parents. Tom had compiled it all. He had been collecting evidence. Grandma Eleanor, my father's mother, had been a formidable woman, sharp, witty, and with an uncanny ability to see through nonsense. She had passed away 5 years ago. My parents had held a small, perfunctory funeral and informed me that her estate was mostly gone, eaten up by medical bills and bad investments. They'd given me a check for $5,000, a little something she wanted you to have, and told me to be grateful. The documents on the screen told a different story. The first file I opened was the deed to my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house where my daughter had been insulted just hours before. Except it wasn't my parents' house. It was held in a revocable living trust, the Eleanor Vance Trust. My parents were listed as lifetime tenants, and the sole beneficiary of the trust upon their passing or their violation of its terms was me. I read the terms. My heart was hammering in my chest. Grandma Eleanor had stipulated that my parents could live in the house for the rest of their lives, provided they maintained it and, this was the crucial part, provided they continue to foster a stable, loving, and supportive family environment for all descendants of my bloodline. A stable, loving, and supportive environment. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. My mother calling her 10-year-old granddaughter ugly. Was that supportive? My father's complicit silence. Was that loving? A lifetime of being the family scapegoat. Was that stable? It was a morality clause. My grandmother, from beyond the grave, had given me a weapon. But there was more. I clicked on another folder. Inheritance. My grandmother's will was clear. Aside from the house, she had left me a portfolio of stocks and bonds, a significant amount. An amount that would have changed my life after Tom died. An amount that would have meant I wouldn't have had to work 2 jobs, that Lily and I could have had security, could have had a cushion against the sharp edges of the world. The total value at the time of her death was just over $470,000. I felt dizzy. I gripped the edge of the desk. My parents had told me it was all gone. A lie. A bald-faced, monstrous lie. Tom, my clever, careful Tom, had included the statements from the estate account. And then, he'd included the statements from my parents' personal accounts. I watched the money move, a transfer of $100,000 from the estate account to my parents' account, the day after the funeral. A month later, a check written from their account to Clara for $75,000. Memo, down payment, another transfer, $50,000. 2 weeks later, a charge at a luxury car dealership in Clara's name. It went on and on. Vacations, designer clothes, payments to Mark's failed business. They had systematically drained my inheritance and funneled it directly to my sister. They hadn't just let me struggle. They had paid for my sister's extravagant life with the money that should have been my safety net. The money my grandmother had left to protect me, to protect Lily. The cold resolve that had settled in me at the dinner table now solidified into something as hard and as sharp as diamond. The hurt was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was a quiet, humming certainty. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. I had ink. I had documents. I had proof. Ink beats opinions. Facts beat feelings. I spent the rest of the night printing everything. I highlighted the relevant clauses in the trust. I highlighted the bank transfers. I created a timeline. It was like preparing a case for trial. The defendant, my entire family. The verdict was already in. I was just preparing for the sentencing. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I dropped Lily off at school, kissing her forehead and telling her again how much I loved her. Her eyes were still puffy, her smile still fragile. Seeing her face steeled my spine. This wasn't for me, it was for her. I was breaking a chain, a generational curse of cruelty that was not going to be passed down to my daughter. She would not learn to absorb poison. She would learn that you don't have to. My first call was to my grandma Eleanor's sister, my great-aunt Margaret. She was 94, lived in Florida, and possessed the same no-nonsense attitude as her late sister. I told her everything. The comment at dinner, the discovery of the flash drive, the trust, the stolen inheritance. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. I could hear the faint sound of the ocean through her phone. Finally, she spoke, her voice raspy but clear as a bell. Eleanor always said your mother was a fool and your father was a coward, and that Clara has a soul like a shriveled pea. I'm not surprised. I'm just sorry it took you so long to see it. What do I do, Aunt Margaret? I asked, my voice trembling for the first time. You do what Eleanor would have wanted, she said, and there was a sudden steel in her voice. You take back what is yours. Her lawyer was a man named Arthur Vance. He's old, but he's a bulldog. I'll call him and tell him to expect you. He'll know what to do. There was no hesitation. No, are you sure? No, but they're your family. Just a clear, unwavering line of support. It was like water in the desert. I met with Arthur Vance that afternoon. His office was old fashioned, all dark wood and leather bound books that smelled of dust and justice. He was a small man in a rumpled suit with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He had already spoken to Aunt Margaret. He listened to my story without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin. I laid out my printed documents on his large mahogany desk. He examined each one with a practiced eye. He read the trust document twice. He looked at the bank statements, his lips pursed. When he was done, he looked up at me. Your grandmother was a very clever woman, he said. This trust is ironclad. The morality clause is airtight. Calling your daughter a minor and a bloodline descendant, the ugly one, in a public setting, is a flagrant violation of the terms. Not to mention the financial malfeasance regarding your inheritance. That's not just a violation, my dear. That's fraud and theft. The words hung in the air. Fraud, theft. These weren't family squabbles. They were crimes. So, what are my options? I asked. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Options? You have a royal flush. We can file to have your parents immediately removed as lifetime tenants due to the violation of the trust terms. The house reverts to you, immediately. We can also file a civil suit for the recovery of the full amount of your inheritance, plus 9 years of interest, compounded annually. And frankly, we could press criminal charges for the fraud, though that can get messy. I thought about it. Criminal charges felt like too much. I didn't want them in jail. I wanted them to understand consequence. For the first time in their lives, I wanted them to feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Let's start with the house and the civil suit, I said. My voice was steady. I didn't recognize it. Arthur smiled, a thin, satisfied smile. Excellent. We'll draw up the eviction notice and the summons today. When would you like to serve them? I looked at the calendar on his desk. Christmas was 2 days ago. It was December 27th, a dead space in the year, a time of quiet reflection and family togetherness. How wonderfully ironic. Tomorrow, I said. I'll do it myself. He raised an eyebrow. That's irregular, but I suppose in this case it might be effective. He started shuffling papers, all business. The eviction gives them 30 days to vacate the premises. The summons will inform them that they are being sued and that their assets will be frozen pending the outcome. It will be a very unhappy new year for them. I walked out of his office, feeling strangely calm. The weight that I had carried for my entire life, the heavy cloak of responsibility for everyone else's happiness, it was just gone. I felt light. I felt free. I felt powerful. You don't need armor when you have the truth. The next day, I picked up the sealed legal envelopes from Arthur's office. They felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of consequence. I called my mother. Hello? Her voice was wary. She was clearly expecting a fight or a tearful apology. Hi, Mom, I said, my tone bright and breezy. I was thinking of stopping by. I have some belated Christmas gifts for you and Dad. There was a pause. She was confused. This wasn't in the script. Oh, she said. Well, all right. Clara and Mark are here. We were just about to have some coffee. Perfect, I said. I'll be there in 20. I drove to their house, my house, one last time as a visitor. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I walked up the familiar stone path. I could see them through the big picture window, sitting in the living room. My mother was talking animatedly, waving her hands. Clara was laughing, her head thrown back. They looked so comfortable, so secure. Funny what you take for granted when you think the ground beneath you is solid. I rang the doorbell. My father answered, a strained smile on his face. Come in, he said, avoiding my eyes. I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled the same as it always had. Lemon polish and my mother's expensive perfume, a scent I used to associate with a complicated kind of comfort. Now it just smelled like lies. They were all gathered in the living room, a tableau of smug entitlement. My mother sat in her favorite armchair, looking at me like a queen granting an audience. Clara and Mark were draped over the sofa. "Well, look who it is," Clara said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Decided to stop pouting?" I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. My focus was on my parents. I walked over to the coffee table and placed the two large manila envelopes on its polished surface. "My Christmas gifts," I said, my voice even. My mother looked at the envelopes, then at me, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "What is this? No wrapping paper?" she said, trying to make it a joke. "Open them," I said. My father reached for one, but my mother slapped his hand away lightly. "Let me," she said. She clearly thought this was some grand gesture of apology from me, a prelude to my begging for forgiveness. She picked up the thicker envelope, the one addressed to both of them. She tore it open with a flourish. She pulled out the sheaf of papers. Her eyes scanned the first page. I watched her face. It was a slow, fascinating process. The smugness evaporated first, replaced by confusion. Her brow furrowed. Her mouth formed a little O of disbelief. She licked her lips, her eyes darting back and forth across the page. "What is it, dear?" my father asked, leaning forward. She didn't answer. She just kept reading. And then I saw it. The moment of dawning horror. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty grayish pallor. Her skin seemed to shrink against her bones. Her hand, the one holding the papers, began to tremble violently. This isn't real," she whispered, her voice a strangled rasp. "This is some kind of sick joke." Clara, now intrigued, got up from the sofa and snatched the papers from our mother's hand. "What is going on?" she demanded. She started to read, Mark looking over her shoulder. I saw the same sequence of emotions play out on their faces, only faster: confusion, disbelief, panic. "Eviction notice!" Clara shrieked, her voice cracking. "What the hell is this? 30 days to vacate the property?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of rage and fear. "Have you lost your mind?" My father finally grabbed the papers. He read the first line and his jaw went slack. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Honey, there must be a misunderstanding. This is our house." "No," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying across the suddenly silent room. "It isn't. It's my house. It has always been my house. Grandma Eleanor left it to me in a trust. You were just tenants, and your lease is up." My mother finally found her voice. "You can't do this! We're your parents! This is about that stupid comment, isn't it? You're tearing this family apart over a joke." She was starting to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage, the tears of a tyrant whose power has just been stripped away. "It was not a joke," I said calmly. "It was a violation of the terms of the trust. A trust that stipulated you were to provide a loving and supportive environment. You failed. For 35 years, you have failed." I then turned my attention to the second envelope, still sitting on the table. "And this one," I said, sliding it towards them, "is for you as well. It's a summons." Clara's eyes widened. "A what?" "My lawyer will be in touch," I explained, as if discussing the weather, "regarding the recovery of the $472,814 you stole from my inheritance, plus 9 years of interest." That was the final blow. Clara let out a sound like a wounded animal. Mark's face went completely white. He looked like he was going to be sick. My father sank back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. My mother just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. We were managing it for you," she stammered, the lie sounding pathetic even to her own ears. "We were going to give it to you. We invested it." "You invested it in Clara's car," I said, my voice like ice. "You invested it in her down payment. You invested it in her vacations. You left me and your granddaughter to struggle while you spent her future on trinkets. It's over." I stood there for a moment, watching the wreckage. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vengeful satisfaction, but I didn't. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the war is over. The quiet of a verdict being read. The quiet of justice, finally, being served. I turned and walked to the door. "You'll regret this!" my mother screamed from behind me. "You'll be all alone. You're destroying your family." I paused at the door, but I didn't turn around. "You destroyed it," I said softly. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." And then I walked out, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was finally going there. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as I'd anticipated. The first wave was the phone calls. They came in a deluge, a coordinated attack. First my mother, weeping hysterically one minute, screaming threats the next. Then my father, pleading, trying to appeal to a sense of family duty I no longer possessed. Then Clara, her voice a venomous hiss, telling me I was a monster. I didn't engage, I just listened. And then I said, "Please direct all future correspondence to my lawyer, Arthur Vance," and I hung up. After the third call, I blocked their numbers. Then came the second wave, the flying monkeys. My Aunt Carol called, my mother's sister. "I can't believe what you're doing to your mother," she shrieked without even a hello. "After everything she's done for you, she is a good woman and you are a selfish, ungrateful child." "Aunt Carol," I said calmly, "did she tell you she called my 10-year-old daughter ugly in front of the whole family?" There was a brief pause. "Well," she sputtered, "children need to learn not to be so sensitive. You're ruining her life over a few words." "Did she tell you she and my father stole nearly $500,000 from me that my grandmother left?" I asked, my voice still level. A longer pause this time. "That's a family matter," she finally said, her voice weak. "You shouldn't be airing your dirty laundry." "It's a legal matter now," I said. "Goodbye, Carol." I blocked her number too. One by one, I built a wall of silence. They hired a lawyer, of course. A flashy, cheap-looking man who sent Arthur a blustering letter full of threats and accusations. Arthur sent back a single-page response that consisted mostly of photocopied bank statements and the highlighted morality clause from the trust. Their lawyer called them a week later and told them they had no case. He advised them to settle, to vacate the house and arrange a payment plan for the stolen money. To fight it would be to risk public humiliation and potentially criminal charges. The silence that followed that news was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The 30 days passed in a tense quiet. I got Lily a new phone number and instructed her school not to release her to anyone but me. We were an island, the two of us. It was lonely at first, but it was a clean loneliness, a safe one. On the 30th day, a moving truck appeared outside the house. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. Arthur had arranged for a representative to be there to collect the keys and ensure the property was left in good condition. They left it a mess, of course, petty, spiteful acts of defiance, a ketchup stain on the living room carpet, a deep scratch in the hardwood floor. It didn't matter. It could all be fixed. The foundation was sound. They moved into a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The court ordered them to begin repaying me. Their assets were garnished. They had to sell my mother's expensive jewelry. They had to sell the car they had bought for Clara. Clara, faced with a life devoid of parental subsidy, had to get a job. She became a receptionist at a dental office. I heard from Aunt Margaret that she complained constantly. Mark, her husband, saw the writing on the wall. The money was gone, the lifestyle was over. He left her 3 months later. They never apologized. They never acknowledged what they had done. To hear them tell it to the few people who would still listen, they were the victims of a cold, vindictive daughter who had stolen their home and their security over a misunderstanding. They never understood that the money was secondary. The house was just a house. What they had truly stolen was my peace of mind, my sense of self-worth, and my daughter's innocence. And that was a debt they could never repay. Lily and I moved into the house a month after they left. We had to have it professionally cleaned. The smell of their resentment seemed to have seeped into the walls. But once it was clean, once we started to fill it with our own things, our own laughter, it began to change. We painted over the drab, formal beige walls with bright, cheerful colors. Lily's room became a vibrant sea of turquoise and purple. We tore out the stiff, manicured rose bushes my mother had prized and planted a chaotic, beautiful vegetable garden in the backyard. The house began to breathe again. The first night we slept there, I tucked Lily into her new bed. She looked around the room at her books on the shelves and her drawings taped to the wall. "Is this really our house now, Mommy?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yes, baby," I said, stroking her hair. "It's ours. It's safe here." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Grandma Eleanor gave it to us, didn't she?" "She did," I said, my throat tight. "She wanted to make sure we'd always be okay." Lily smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached all the way to her beautiful brown eyes. "She sounds nice," she said. And then she snuggled down under the covers and fell asleep. Life became quiet, normal. The money from the lawsuit, which we eventually won by default, went into a new trust. One for Lily. Her education, her future, it was secure. I was able to quit my second job. I had time to help her with her homework, to go to her soccer games, to just be present. We found a new family. A family of friends, of neighbors who brought over soup when we were sick and celebrated our small victories. We learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who makes you feel safe. I don't hate them. I don't think about them enough to hate them. They are a story I sometimes tell myself, a reminder of where I came from, and a measure of how far I've gone. They chose their path. They chose appearances over love, money over integrity, cruelty over kindness. And they are living with the consequences. I chose my daughter. I chose peace. I chose to break the cycle. And some nights, when the house is quiet and Lily is asleep, I stand in the living room and I look out at the garden we planted and I feel a profound sense of peace. It's the peace of a war won, the peace of a long overdue justice, the peace of coming home. So, what do you think? Did I go too far, or was it the only language they would ever understand? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.